Let's get to the meat of the sandwich. I'm talking the main character. Hey guys, what's up today? It's P.E. Gilbert, your blogger, writing consultant, and the author to the upcoming fantasy novella, The Sultan's Daughter. And today, we shall look at 9 tips on how to create the ultimate protagonist. But before we go any further, hit that subscribe button in the bottom corner. As said in the previous video, your main character is the most important element of your story. He is the hinge on which your story rests. And by a main character, I mean he must be a point of view or POV character, and he must have the personality, ambitions, and agency to make decisions and mistakes to drive the narrative forwards. But how do you create a great, engaging main character in comparison to, say, an average one, or one you don't really care about? Well, follow these 9 tips and you'll create a main character that your audience just cannot get enough of. Tip 1. Decide the main character's goal and the reason for it. The main character needs a goal to have something to strive for. It gives him his purpose, his reason to be in the story. Some would even argue that it is the reason for the story itself. But a goal in and of itself is not enough. The main character needs a reason for this goal, a motive if you like, and this motive must be logical and plausible under the circumstances. The motive binds the main character to his journey, and it builds a cord of empathy with the audience, making them want to root for him. For example, take Edmond Dantes from Alexander Dumas' classic, The Count of Monte Cristo. At the start of the story, Edmund has everything going for him. He has a promising career in the Navy, and he is about to marry the love of his life, the beautiful Mercedes. But then, on the day of his wedding, he is arrested for treason and locked up in solitary confinement in the Chateau d'If. His goal, therefore, is to get out of prison and to get back at those who wronged him. And his motive? Justice or vengeance, it depends on your interpretation, but either is a powerful and believable motive under the circumstances. Our second example is Tobias from Jenna Moreci's The Saviour's Champion. By the way, for those of you who don't know who Jenna Moreci is, she is a best-selling author and a YouTuber. I thoroughly recommend you checking out her channel. Jenna is engaging, she is terrific, she's funny, she's intelligent, and she gives great writing and marketing tips. Plus, I recommend her books, The Saviour's Champion and Eve as well. I have read The Saviour's Champion and it's a great read. Check it out when you have a moment. I've left a link in the description below. Coming back to Jenna's main character Tobias though, at the start of the story, he hears of and enters the Saviour's Tournament. Thus, his goal for the story is simple, to survive it and win it. And his motive? Well, actually it's a really noble one. You see, Tobias comes from a poor family, and his mother struggles to make ends meet. There are lots of riches for the one who wins the Saviour's Tournament, and Tobias hopes that by winning the tournament, he can help his mother out financially. Therefore, like with Edmond Dantes, Tobias's goals and the motive are really plausible and make him very empathetic in the eyes of the reader. We want him to succeed as a result. Tip 2. Decide the main character's endpoint. You may think logically that the best place to start when it comes to planning your narrative and the main character is, well, at the start. But actually no, you can save yourself a ton of time if you decide the main character's endpoint early on. Once you've decided what the ending will be for him, then you can decide how the main character comes about this end, and then you can give him the necessary character traits that can make this end come about in a logical and satisfying way. Take for example, Lord Eddard Stark from A Song of Ice and Fire. George R.R. Martin decided early on that his main character, his only Tolkien-esque main character I should add, was going to meet his end via the 2 Bs, betrayal and beheaded. Once George R.R. Martin decided that Lord Eddard would meet his end in this grisly fashion, he gave him the necessary character traits, such as being honourable and being trustworthy, thereby making him wholly unfit for the stakes at court at King's Landing. A more cheerful and overall happier example comes from Ariel from The Little Mermaid, or, as Sebastian the Crab says, Howard Ashman and Don Bluth, the creators of The Little Mermaid and the genii architects behind the Disney Renaissance of the latter 80s decided early on that their titular mermaid would end up the film as a human and married to Prince Eric. Once they made this decision, all they had to do was make Ariel have a strong desire to see the shore above her, to give her a great singing voice, and to make her like Prince Eric. Tip 3. Decide the main character's starting point. Once you've decided the main character's endpoint, it is so much easier to decide his starting point. To put it simply, if the main character is going to go on a quest and defeat the big baddie, then the start of the story should be that the big baddie does something to him and he goes on the quest. If only it were always so simple. Keeping with our examples of Lord Eddard Stark and Ariel, once George R.R. Martin decided that Lord Eddard would end up dead in the capital, then simply he had to get Lord Eddard to the capital, which he successfully does when King Robert Baratheon comes to Winterfell to request that Lord Eddard be his hand the king. Although, it's never really a request when a king asks something of you, is it? Similarly, once Howard Ashman and Don Bluth decided that Ariel would end the film as a human and married to Eric, well, all they had to do was start her off as a mermaid and have her meet Prince Eric early on in the film, which conveniently happens. Tip 4. Give the main character a story arc. It is not enough for the main character to just go on a physical journey. He must develop as a character over the course of the narrative due to the experiences that he goes through. Moreover, the audience must see a logical change from who the main character was at the start of the narrative to who he becomes at the end of it. This makes the conclusion of the narrative so much more satisfying. A classic example is Ebenezer Scrooge from Charles Dickens's A Christmas Carol. At the start of the narrative, he is rapacious, he's a miser, and he is unconcerned by his family's welfare. But after seeing 3 ghosts and seeing his fate before him, he has a complete 180-degree turn, and he becomes a generous man and a loving grandfather. A more modern and complex example comes from Bruce Wayne / Batman in The Dark Knight. At the start of the film, Bruce is full of optimism. He believes that he can beat back crime, he can make Gotham safer and less corrupt, and in the form of Harvey Dent, Gotham has its White Knight, and then maybe, just maybe, Gotham will no longer need Batman anymore. But by the end of the film, Bruce is demoralised. He has suffered yet another personal loss in the form of Rachel Dawes, and has to take the fall for Harvey Dent's crimes. In short, he has been psychologically beaten by the Joker, and he is a different person from the one we met at the start of the film. Tip 5. Give the main character positive and negative traits. This is the meat and bones of the main character. His personality. Writers should give their main character a blend of typically positive and negative traits, and they should make these traits be an integral part to the decisions and mistakes that he makes, and they should explain why he makes them. I want to add here that conventional main characters tend to have more positive than negative traits. The exception to this is anti-heroes, and we shall look at them and how to write them in a separate video. Our first example of a more conventional main character is Tyrion Lannister from A Song of Ice and Fire. Tyrion is a dwarf, he's small, he's physically weak, he's also prone to drinking and whoring, and he comes from a house that is, well, not exactly known for being honourable. Yet, Tyrion is also witty, he's intelligent, and he has a good understanding for what it motivates those around him. Consequently, he has a knack for getting himself out of sticky situations and for finding solutions to problems. Well, at least he did in the earlier seasons and books. Our next example is Astra from Angelika Koch's Pernicious, True Evil. For those of you who are not so familiar with Angelika Koch's Pernicious and her main character Astra, check out the interview that I did with Angelika earlier this year. Angelika is great, she is fascinating, and her book is just as absorbing. I read it recently, I really enjoyed it, and her main character Astra is a great one. Check it out. Tip 6. Give the main character a flaw. Curiously, what makes a main character interesting and engaging is not his strengths and his positive traits, but actually his weaknesses and his flaw. And by a flaw, I mean the flaw should be internal, and the flaw must impact the main character's decision-making process and the plot vicariously, and be one that the audience can relate to. Just to say, you can make your main character's flaw external. This is often what has to be done with Superman because he is invincible. As a result, they put him into close proximity with kryptonite, or they put his love interest, usually Lois Lane, into danger, thereby giving him a weakness or a flaw. Nevertheless, making a main character's flaw be external is a poor substitute for an internal one, as it makes for less compelling viewing or reading depending on which medium you're in. Therefore, it is best that you make his flaw internal, as we shall see from our examples. Our first example is Dr. Victor Frankenstein. Dr. Frankenstein is a scientific genius, and he's innovative. He becomes the first person to create life outside the womb, for heaven's sakes. Yet Victor is also ashamed of his creature, and he rejects it outright. His shame is his flaw, and his flaw impacts the plot because when the creature returns, it does so with tragic consequences for Victor, as it murders his brother and his fiancée. Our second example is Shakespeare's titular Macbeth. Macbeth might be a brilliant soldier and battle commander, and some may even regard his ruthlessness as a positive as well. However, he is also temperamental, lacking in political shrewdness, and easily seduced by first his wife, and then the three witches who lull him into a full sense of security with regards to Macduff. Above all, Macbeth's flaw is his conceitedness, and his flaw impacts the plot because when he takes to battle at the end against who else but Macduff, believing that he is invulnerable, he meets his demise. Therefore, like with Dr. Frankenstein, Macbeth's flaw is relatable and the audience understands how he comes about his end as a result of his flaw. Tip 7. Give the main character an internal conflict. When it comes to creating a three-dimensional main character, nothing beats an internal conflict. This is because, as William Faulkner once famously wrote, "The only thing worth writing about is the human heart in conflict with itself." An internal conflict can take one of two forms. It can be either a paradox tearing at the heart of the main character's personality, which will significantly impact the decisions and the mistakes that he makes, or it can be merely situational, i.e. the main character faces a situation whereby he must choose one of the two things he wants most. Whichever one you choose, make sure that the internal conflict impacts the main character's decision-making process. That way, the audience can understand and even empathise with the decision that the main character makes, even if they wholly disagree with what he does. A brilliant example of a main character who has a paradox at the heart of his personality is Theon Greyjoy from A Song of Ice and Fire. In A Clash of Kings, the second volume in the series, Theon becomes a point-of-view character and we get a true understanding for what he is about. He was born a Greyjoy but raised a Stark, and for obvious reasons he wants to please both his non-biological brother Robb Stark and his biological father, Lord Balon Greyjoy. But this is impossible. Consequently, Theon is conflicted. He makes wrong decisions and halfway measures as he cannot make up his mind who he wants to be. If he wanted to be a Stark after returning to Pike, he should have run back to Robb Stark and told him all about his father's plans. Conversely, if he wants to be a Greyjoy, he should have taken Winterfell, sacked it, burned it, pillaged it, and taken Bran and Rickon Stark, Robb's younger brothers, back to Pike as hostages. However, because Theon is conflicted, he kind of doesn't do either. He takes Winterfell, but then he wants to hold it even though he doesn't have the resources to do so. Then Bran and Rickon seemingly escape, and he burns two boys to make it look like he's a strong man, but really he just looks weak, and everyone, even his own people, hate him as a result. The net effect of all of this for Theon is that it ends in catastrophe for him. By the end of A Clash of Kings, he is Ramsay Bolton's prisoner, he is tied to the cross, and he is tortured into reek. An example where internal strife is merely situational comes from the James Bond film GoldenEye, in the train scene. At this point, James has a stark choice to make. Either he can save Natalia, or he can kill his enemy, Alec Trevelyan. He chooses to save Natalia, and crucially, this impacts the plot because Natalia, who's a computer hacker, subsequently finds out where the other GoldenEye satellite is, i.e. where they have to go to next. Tip 8. Decide the main character's age, gender, and status. Obviously, the main character has to be of an age, a gender, and a status within the society that he comes from or lives in. Likewise, it can explain why the main character is in the position that the main character is in at the start of the story. But nothing more, and this is because the age, gender, and status in and of themselves do not explain why the main character makes the decisions that he does. For example, let's look at Katniss Everdeen from The Hunger Games. Katniss is a 16-year-old girl from a deprived area, but she does not become the Mockingjay, the symbol of the revolution against President Snow, solely because of that. Or else, how do you explain why thousands of other girls of about her age do not become the symbol? Rather, it is because Katniss is skilled and because she wins the games that she becomes the symbol. It is her achievements that do it, not her status or age or gender. Similarly, take Dalinar from Brandon Sanderson's The Stormlight Archives. Dalinar starts off the story as a royal advisor because he is the uncle to King El-Hokar. I really hope I've got that pronunciation correctly, but if not, or whether I do or don't, someone let me know in the comments. Yeah, just let me know. I hope I've got it correct, but if not, let me know how to pronounce it, please. But coming back to Dalinar, he's not just a royal advisor and actually listened to because he is the king's uncle, although that definitely helps. Rather, it is because he is a loyal advisor and because he is a competent general. And thirdly, take Logan Ninefingers from Joe Abercrombie's The First Law trilogy. Logan is a middle-aged fugitive from the north, but he is not a fugitive because he's middle-aged and a criminal. By God, there are no shortages of those from where he comes from. Rather, it is because he fought and lost in a war and has since refused to kneel to King Bethard. Tip 9. Give the main character a backstory. Everyone has a backstory. Everyone has come from somewhere and everyone has had experiences influence us in a positive and negative way. The same must be true for your main character, otherwise the audience may feel that the author just plucked the main character out of thin air, or a part of the anatomy that is best not discussed. Whatever your main character's backstory, the important part is that it must impact the plot and his decision-making process. For example, Lee Chandler from Manchester by the Sea. Casey Affleck's character in this film regularly gets drunk and beats up people for no apparent reason. The audience has no cause to empathise with him until, through a series of flashbacks, we learn about his backstory. Then we understand his antisocial behaviour, even if we completely disagree with it. His past affects him in a negative way on a daily basis, as he cannot live with himself. Yet, his past also explains why he tries to do his best for his nephew to give him a better chance at a good future. A great example of a main character from the fantasy genre with an interesting backstory is Harry Potter. At the start of the series, he lives with his relatives, the Dursleys, and not his parents. The Dursleys treat him horribly, and so that explains why he's always so keen to go to Hogwarts at the start of every academic year. And because the Dark Lord killed his parents, we absolutely, completely understand why Harry is so determined to defeat the Dark Lord at every turn. A main character that I came across recently who has a really interesting backstory is Elara Dunlin from J.M. Buckler's fantasy series The Seeker of Time. Elara's backstory is surprising and it very much influences her decisions in the story. What's more, I had the privilege of interviewing J.M. Buckler recently. She is fascinating, she is wonderful, and her book is just as good. I recommend both The Seeker of Time and the interview. Check it out, I have left links in the description below. And that's all I have for you today, guys. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have found this video useful, interesting, and that it makes the writing process a little bit easier for you. Like, comment, and hit that subscribe button below, and let me know what you think of my tips. What do you think I've missed out? Do you like my examples? Do you think they're appropriate? In addition, come the 2nd of July, my debut fantasy novella, The Sultan's Daughter, is going to be released, and then you can check to see whether or not I keep to my tips. Until next time, keep well. Once again, guys, I just wanted to say thank you so much for watching my video. I really appreciate it and I hope you've enjoyed it. Hit that subscribe button and then you will be the first to receive more awesome content from my channel, and I hope to see you again soon.